What's up guys, Enkiri here, and today we're going to talk about how to grow yourself some big legs and how to do it really fast. And I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a hint right from the get-go here. It's not quarter squats, but don't tell anybody I said that, or you might start brewing up another shitstorm. Now, before we move into the true secret for how to build big legs fast, I do kind of want to address that quarter squat thing very briefly though. And I'll start by saying that quarter squats are probably not totally useless, so I won't write them off altogether. Though to be honest, you're never gonna see me program them either for myself or for any of my clients. But if another coach can justify their inclusion for a specific individual or for a specific purpose, then you won't hear me complain about it. All that said, we've all seen the study that our friend cited in his quarter squat video, as it's actually several years old. And here's my problem with it. For that study, they took 28 college athletes and they separated them into 3 different groups. And the 3 different groups performed a strength training program where they all squatted to different depths. Basically, there were one group doing full squats, one group doing half squats, and one group doing what they called quarter squats. And in their data pool, the subjects who did the quarter squats experienced the greatest performance improvements in terms of vertical jumping and 40-yard dash time. So that's cool and all. However, in my opinion, this is all really a pointless comparison to be making in the first place. Are quarter squats more stressful on the knees? I don't know and I don't care. Do they lead to greater performance improvements in the vertical jump and 40-yard dash in highly trained athletes as compared to full squats? The answer to that is quite possibly. But notice how I emphasize highly trained athletes here, because here's the thing. Highly trained athletes have already spent years performing full squats and are already strong at that movement pattern through a full range of motion. They've already built that base and plucked that fruit and gotten the performance enhancing benefits from doing so. So you put these already strong guys on a program revolving around quarter squats, which potentially involves a higher degree of joint angle specificity to running and jumping, and it allows them to overload and further strengthen that segment of the range of motion. And sure, they might see some additional improvements in running speed and jumping height because it's a novel and more specific training modality. However, now we have to ask ourselves a few questions. One, does this mean that the same would hold true for beginners who haven't already built that base of strength through a full range of motion? Probably not. In fact, not only would they be leaving those initial gains on the table that are incredibly easy to harvest if they overly focused on quarter squats as compared to full range of motion squatting, they would also probably just hurt themselves by trying to do so. Another question is, was LeBron James quarter squatting because his trainer read that study and told him to? Probably not. I wouldn't attribute any rhyme or reason to LeBron's shallow squatting beyond he just has really long legs and probably can't go any deeper without having to resort to using baby weights that aren't worthy of posting on the gram. Now, another question is, are quarter squats the optimal training modality for improving vertical jump and sprint performance in highly trained athletes? And the answer to that question is hell to the motherfucking no. And here's why I say this comparison of full squats to quarter squats is fucking moot in the first place. If athletic enhancement is your goal, you should already be doing some variation of full squats in your training the majority of the time. Or at the very least, you should have spent a significant amount of time building up a significant and enduring base of leg and hip strength through using the full squat. Once you've built that base, you can take time off from the squat for certain training cycles or whatever. Not many people are going to argue with this idea. And at some point in time though, the performance gains that you get from these full range of motion squats will inevitably begin to plateau. This is another fact that should be obvious and nobody's going to try to argue with it. When this happens though, I don't really recommend implementing quarter squats because it's not optimal, frankly, but instead of becoming bogged down by joint angle specificity at this point in your training, or overloading joint angle specificity, whatever the hell, instead you should be thinking in terms of building power and explosiveness, which is done with velocity-based training. Exercises like push presses and power cleans and snatches from the high hang position, rack jerks, heavy kettlebell swings, and perhaps most importantly, weighted jumping variations that utilize multiple different loads and cover multiple points across the force velocity curve. Not only do most of these options carry pretty much the same level of hip, knee, and ankle joint specificity to athletic movements as quarter squats do anyway, but unlike quarter squats, they also train velocity. They enhance your ability to produce force quickly, which is literally the basis upon which all athletic movement is founded. And they do all this while, again, unlike the quarter squat, being outstanding exercises in their own right that provide a myriad of other benefits that I've talked about incessantly at this point in other videos. The full squat will nudge these exercises along just like it'll nudge the quarter squat along. Even your precious studies admit to this fact time and time again. The basis for your strength gains are laid down upon strength that is built by working joints through their full applicable range of motion. And then that strength is readily and easily transferred into partial variations down the road. But the inverse is not true. So it's a given that you should be strong and proficient at squatting through a full range of motion to improve athletic performance. Besides, talking about joint angle specificity when an individual's joints are weak at every single angle is simply myopic. So then you're left not with comparing quarter squats to full squats, but rather quarter squats to those traditional explosive exercises like the ones I mentioned a minute ago. And in terms of improving performance in athletes who've already built up a base of leg and hip strength, the former can't even hold a candle to the latter. Hence, maybe quarter squats can be beneficial in the right circumstances, but there are better alternatives 99% of the time. And as usual, I've droned on a little bit longer than I intended to, so let's get to the actual topic of today's video, which is how to build big legs really quickly. Now, as you guys know, I'm a fan of the barbell squat and all of its variations. I don't discriminate here. Front squats, high bar squats, low bar squats, zombie squats, pause squats, safety bar squats, etc., etc. I just love squats. You go nice and deep and you get that loaded eccentric lengthening with a good stretch on the quads and the bottom right before catching a natural and powerful stretch reflex to propel you out of the hole and build that massive size and strength in your legs. Interestingly enough, however, you don't get very much eccentric lengthening or very much of a stretch at all in the quads when you perform quarter squats. And loaded eccentric muscle lengthening is typically what's associated with microtrauma in the muscles. And that microtrauma is one of the things that is specifically tied to hypertrophy. This is in part why bodybuilders are so obsessed with eccentrics in general. And it makes sense. Think about one time when your legs were really sore the day after squatting. It doesn't really hurt all that much to stand up, even when your legs are sore like that. But it sure as hell hurts to sit down because that's where the trauma occurs. The microtrauma is more associated with the eccentric phase, which is more associated with hypertrophy. Whereas the concentric, or the part where you stand back up, is more associated with building strength. But if this loaded lengthening portion of the lift is more associated with muscle hypertrophy, and the quarter squat minimizes this loaded lengthening phase, how can it build big legs fast? The short answer is, it can't, and it won't. But you're not out of luck, because thankfully, I have found a solution for you, and that solution is full squats. But I didn't just make this video to clown, though. I'm being 100% serious here, and I'm going to provide you with a practical solution to building big legs really quickly in just a moment. But if you do want to build big legs, I honestly can't see why you would ever do quarter squats. In fact, finding exercises that allow you to take the knee joints through a longer range of motion and get a bigger stretch in the quads are typically what's understood to elicit more leg growth amongst pretty much all training populations. And this is why hack squats and sissy squats and leg presses can actually be good for quad hypertrophy. Those aren't necessarily the best exercises for athletes, but from the standpoint of pure hypertrophy, they undoubtedly have their place. Now, as a highly experienced squatter, I've pretty much tried it all over the years, and my legs have grown substantially as a result, up to a circumference of about 25 inches. I don't remember when my legs first eclipsed the 25-inch mark, But it was sometime around 2013 or so, something like 6 or 7 years ago, and they've stayed that way for years, right up until these last few months. Now, I don't deliberately train for hypertrophy, it's more of a side effect of my training, but still, this is important to note. And if you follow my training blogs, you know that I've been squatting on and off for these past couple of years because I've already built up a solid base of leg strength and I have other goals now. But anyway, in recent history, I have hit a 5x5 with 395 pounds on the back squat pretty easily. I've tripled 430 pounds pretty easily on the high bar squat. I've zombie front squatted 335 pounds for a set of 5, 350 for a set of 4, 370 for a triple, and 405 for a single, which is probably the most impressive squat that I've done in recent history. But so my leg strength is up pretty high still, and my squat training has been pretty intense overall, on and off for these last few years, and yet my legs have remained 25 inches around for the past 6 or 7 years. So it seemed to me that short of gaining large amounts of body weight, I had pretty much grown as much muscle that I was ever gonna grow in my thighs. But then, purely out of happenstance, just a couple short months ago, I decided to experiment with some high rep squat sets known as Widowmakers or breathing squats. The idea here is to take a weight that you can squat for 10 reps, and by resting in between reps and breathing at the top, you're supposed to squat that weight for 20 total reps without racking the bar. Now, I think there is some fallacy in the notion of somehow squatting your 10 rep max for 20 reps, but let's never mind that for a minute, because 10 rep max or a 15 rep max or a 20 rep max, whatever you want to call it, all of that notwithstanding, squatting any particularly heavy weight for 20 reps through a full range of motion is hard motherfucking work. Your legs are gonna be burning, your hamstrings and your glutes are gonna be burning, your lungs are gonna be burning, your back is gonna be tired, and every time you do a rep, you're going to wanna rack the weight. But if you can silence that voice in your head and successfully complete the set, then your legs are gonna fucking grow. In my case, my legs have grown a full inch since I started utilizing this high rep squatting method. As of this morning, they're 26 inches in circumference after having remained 25 inches for around the last 6 or 7 years. That is pretty remarkable when you think about it. Not only because as a highly experienced lifter and highly experienced squatter, I've added an inch of mass around my thighs in just 2 months after they had remained the same size for years on end, but also it's even more remarkable when you consider how much time that I've actually spent training the squat to accomplish this during this training cycle. As it stands, I'm doing 1 high rep set of squats per week. And that's it. The rest of my lower body training is pretty much identical to how it's been for the last year or so, with the only major difference here being that I'm now squatting for very high reps, which I wasn't doing before, and is something I haven't done in a long time. So I'm doing 1 set of squats per week with the goal of hitting 20 reps during that single set. I started the training cycle off with 315 pounds, which I used for 4 straight weeks. I completed sets of 16 reps, 19 reps again, and 22 reps with 315. Then I moved on to 325, which I used for just 2 weeks, where I completed sets of 18 reps and then hit the goal of 20 reps. And then finally, in my most recent training session, I moved up to 335 pounds and I completed 18 reps with it in my very first attempt at that weight. And I hope to bring that up to 20 reps in the next week or 2. And once I do that, I'll jump up to 345 pounds and then we'll see what happens from there. All told, however, this series here represents only 7 total training sessions spread out over the course of about 8 weeks or 2 months total time. So it's just 7 total working sets. Each set takes me approximately 90 seconds to complete, which means in roughly 10 and a half minutes of total training time, I've added an inch of muscle to my thighs. Now, if that's not growing big legs fast, then I don't know what the hell is. Seriously, I don't think there is anything else I could have done short of inject myself with copious amounts of tren that would have possibly produced this much muscle growth in my thighs in such a short period of time with such a small amount of time spent under the bar. But it comes at a cost. And that cost is gut-wrenching hard work. These sets are brutal. It's incredibly difficult to convince yourself to keep going. And several years ago, I honestly probably would have said that this method of high rep squatting doesn't have much value beyond the idea of self-torture or building mental fortitude. But after experimenting with it for a couple months, I have to say that that notion is completely inaccurate. The benefits of these high rep squats are myriad, and the adaptations come on shockingly quickly, as evidenced by the objective measure of my increased thigh circumference. But there's also a bunch of other subjective metrics that are worth noting as well. For one, the increase in lactic acid tolerance in my thighs. When I first started these high rep squat sets, the burning in my legs after 15 reps or so would be nearly unbearable, and it made it very difficult to continue the set. But after a few sessions, that began to dissipate, and now it's barely even noticeable. My lungs have also experienced positive adaptations as well, whereas after the first few sessions, I would be lying on the floor huffing and puffing for 5 minutes after racking the bar. Shit, 5 or even 10 minutes. Now, I can rack the damn thing and walk away like pretty much nothing happened. And thirdly, core strength and endurance also increased dramatically with these high rep sets as well. In fact, this is my biggest limiting factor during these sets, because after a little while, I simply become incapable of supporting that much weight on my back any longer without just folding over into flexion. And this issue was very pronounced at first, even with just 315 pounds on the bar. But after a few weeks of training like this, it started to become less and less of a problem, even with more and more weight on the bar. And none of this stuff even touches on the aspect of building mental strength and resilience and fortitude, which is also an inevitable effect of pushing through something like this that's so goddamn difficult. And even as I add weight to the bar here, I feel like these sets, mentally and physically, are actually becoming easier for me to get through. None of these effects are something you could get from just doing straight sets of 5 or 8 or even 10 reps, even if the volume was equated or even greater. It's just a different method altogether. It requires a completely different mentality, and it produces a completely different result as an effect. Strength, endurance, total body conditioning, lactic acid resilience, mental fortitude, and slabs of muscle in a very short period of time. All you gotta do is find your nuts and put in the work. It's brutal and intense work, but you only have to be able to deal with it for a very small amount of total time. And the results that you get from it are more than worth the sweat and the pain that must be endured. And that is how you build big legs fast. It's not some super secret training method brought to you by the Russians, verified by another overall pointless study, and disseminated amongst the masses thanks to our lords and saviors in the evidence-based community. In fact, it's a method that's been around since the dawn of modern strength training. Most people just don't have the balls to execute it, and I doubt that anyone has even tried to study it. But if you want to take your leg size to the next level, maybe you should give it a try and see if you have what it takes. Anyway, that's all I got for now, guys. Please be sure to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And definitely leave me some love in the comments down below. Also, if you're interested in online coaching, be sure to shoot me an email at enkiri.elite@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to pass some more information your way. Or just visit my website, www.enkirielitefitness.com, for more details. Anyway, keep training hard, and I'll catch you guys next time.